Today's lesson is about the perfect tense, and I'm going to teach you all about the present perfect, the past perfect, and the future perfect. So you might know a little bit about the perfect tenses, but you haven't had a detailed lesson about it yet. So I want to give you more details, and I want to help you test yourself to see if you can remember when to use the perfect tense, when it's appropriate to use present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. So I'll take you through all of the ways that you can use this type of grammar, and then at the end of the video I'll give you a little quiz and see if you can figure out which perfect tense you're supposed to use. Alright, let's get started. Perfect tense grammar lesson with Speaking with Steph. What does perfect tense mean? It refers to the grammar in English that has a different time aspect than simple tenses. What different types of perfect tense grammar are there? There's present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. Let's look at the present perfect tense. Here's an example. I have been a student in Boston for 3 years. How do we form the present perfect tense? We put have or has plus the past participle. Have been. I have been a student in Boston for 3 years. What is the time aspect in this present perfect example? The time started 3 years ago and it's still continuing into the present. So the student started being a student in Boston 3 years ago, and they're still continuing to be a student right now. In this sentence, we know that she's not finished being a student. What other time aspects are there for the present perfect? Finished recent action, finished action with unclear time in the past, or repeated action in the past. Let's look closer at each of these. Here's an example of the finished recent action. I've just read that novel. Notice, always say I've instead of I have when you're speaking with the present perfect. So this is a finished recent action. I've just read that novel. Here's another one. A finished action with unclear time in the past. I've also traveled to Paris. When did you travel? The time is unclear, or it doesn't matter. Here's one about the repeated action in the past. I've seen that movie many times. When did you see it? How many times? The exact time and amount aren't clear. This is used for the present perfect. Notice that seen is the past participle of see. What are the key time markers for the present perfect tense? Already, ever, for, lately, never, recently, since, still, and yet. So memorize those so that you can know which time markers to use for the present perfect tense. Here's some more examples of the present perfect. He's written so much lately. Betty has lived in Boston since June. You haven't gone to the ballet yet? Let's look at the past perfect tense now. Here's an example. Before I moved to Boston, I had studied English for 5 years. Had studied. How do we form the past perfect? We use had plus the past participle. Notice, past perfect is most often used when there are two past events and one event happened before the other. Let's look at this example a little bit closer. Here's the first event. Studied English for 5 years, then moved to Boston. So you can see that the studying happened before the move. Past perfect is found in novels a lot about two past events. Let's look at an example from the novel titled His Only Wife by Peace Adzomedi that was published in 2020. I just got done reading this book and I highly recommend it if you need a good book to read. I'll put the link in the video description. So this was taken from that novel. When we arrived in Accra, Richard came to welcome my mother and me and show us where we would be living. I hadn't known what to expect when Auntie's driver told us we were close. No one had told me where I would be staying or how Eli and the woman would fit into my living arrangements. Mawasi and I had speculated most of the previous evening when I went over to Togo Pius's to say goodbye. This was taken from chapter 3 on page 36. So what are the two events in this example? Hadn't known, had told, and had speculated. And then the second event is coming to Accra, or Accra. So arrived is the second verb, right, or second event. So notice that you can use the concept of event in terms of knowledge or speaking or speculating, right, which means like thinking about something, making a prediction. So it doesn't have to be like an actual event. It can just be some kind of verb that's being done. Note, past perfect isn't that common in everyday English. It requires more information. For example, she had gotten her vaccination before she flew to the United States. More information. When did she get her vaccination? Before she came to the US. So notice that those two events, right? What are the key time markers for past perfect? Before, by the time, previous, and when. Okay, let's look at the future perfect tense now. By the time I finish studying in Boston, I will have taken 40 classes. Will have taken. How do we form the future perfect tense? You have will plus have plus the past participle. So I know it's a little bit confusing because it's like you're talking about the future, but then you use the past participle to talk about the future. It's kind of confusing. It's like a future past event. So it's like you're looking toward the future and you're trying to say what will happen by the time you do something, right? So by the time I finish studying in Boston, I will have taken 40 classes. What is the time aspect in future perfect? So you have two events. One event happens after another one finishes. So the first event, taken 40 classes, after you finish studying. Future perfect isn't that common in everyday English. It requires more information. Here's an example. She will have driven more than 1,000 miles by the time she arrives. How far will she travel? More than 1,000 miles. So you need more information to use the future perfect tense. What are the time markers for future perfect? Before, by the time, for, and when. Memorize the past participle. Here's the base form. Be, live, study, see, and write. Here's the past tense. Was, were, lived, studied, saw, and wrote. Now what would the past participle be? Been, lived, studied, seen, and written. Notice that lived and studied are the only regular past participles. The other three are called irregular. It means that they have a different spelling. So you have to memorize those. All right, now it's your turn to fill in the blank. What's missing here? Olivia has walked every morning on vacation this week. So this is the present perfect. Which one do you think we need here? So it's something that happened in the past many times, but the time is unclear. Beth has gone to the museum many times. You could also say Beth has visited, or something like that. By the time the woman, they were in their 30s. So look, we're looking at the past here, but now we have more information about two events. So this is past perfect. By the time the woman had met, sorry, the women, not woman, the women, plural, had met, they were in their 30s. So here again, we have two past events. So we need past perfect. And this is a teacher's desk. Had taught English for over 20 years. So now we're talking about the future. When we move to Boston, we will have changed apartments 5 times. So this is future perfect. All right, that's it for the practice. So keep practicing on your own, and don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos.